Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Holy cow.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. This is Real Talk with Stacey Morgenstern, and I'm excited to have our CEO Eric Neuner here for this is going to be an edgy talk, men beyond sex, money, and power. Oh my goodness, we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
So this is Real Talk. Say hi on the chat if you're just joining us. This is the place where we get real, raw, and up close with the stuff that most people are afraid to talk about. And I'm super excited about this topic today. We're going to be talking about men and sex and money and power. And I think this topic might make some people uncomfortable, but I'd say it probably is making us slightly uncomfortable.
Sure.
To approach it live like this, unedited, uncensored, unscripted. But the point is to shake us out of our normal patterns of thinking. And in order to do that, you got to give yourself permission to tell the low down, dirty truth about what drives your behavior, what drives your decisions. And that's what Real Talk is all about. So, hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Carrie's going, this is brave. Oh, yeah. It feels that way to us, too. So I want to kick off with a question. Wow, this is such an edgy topic, but why do men chase sex, money, and power?
I guess from if I think back to when I was young, like early on in a puberty time period, I don't think there's consciousness around it. I think it's just what we do. And particularly around sex, and I think the money power piece is almost like a conduit to sex. If I was gonna like that you think when if you kind of have the money and the power thing, then sex comes. And so if is everything potentially being driven ultimately at a subconscious level by sex, at least initially in our evolution. And if I think back to my early teenage years, not that I was having sex, but
Hi, Mom and Dad.
But I wanted it. And in my pursuit of the external, getting those things, was that driven to such that I would have the choice of having sex.
Well, what do you think is important about, particularly about power? Like, what if we were to break these down? What's important about that chase for power?
Is it a going towards power? Is it actually a moving away towards powerlessness? I think if I reflect on my journey, it was I sought power so that I would never have to feel powerless again.
Because you felt powerless?
Yeah, because I was smaller and I felt like I was an easy victim, an easy target for bullying. And so and then even I was always I was just oriented towards justice, right, in terms of how it should be. And I think I found myself with bosses or supervisors who didn't represent how I thought people should be treated. And I never wanted to work for people like that. And so so my seeking of power was so that I never had someone who told me how I should live or who I should be or how I should do things.
I want to trace that back for a moment. I know you grew up in the Bronx and you said that you were really small. And if anyone's seen Eric speak, you've probably experienced some of his sensitivity as a man. And I'm curious, how was your experience being sensitive in a world where men are taught to be tough and cool and don't show your overjoy. And what does that mean in terms of manhood?
Yeah, I questioned my manliness, right? I questioned my masculinity, like, was I man enough? You know, just some version of not enoughness because I didn't feel I was tough enough.
Were you called names?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the Bronx. Just like that's like just like what you do. I was called nerd from starting at 4th grade, and I think the bigger ones is just like I don't know what language to use, but none of them are appropriate. But some version of wimp, wuss, and usually just in the just inappropriate, vulgar. I Facebook Live. I want to be sensitive to the wide range of politically incorrect things that I was called because I didn't because I wasn't the toughest kid or the toughest kid. Whatever.
Yeah. How did you protect yourself? Like, what kind of behaviors did you take on or way of being that you took on to protect yourself in that?
Most of it was avoidance. Most of it was just avoiding the people that I knew I could be vulnerable or who literally just, because I'm a pretty passionate person, like they like getting a response from me, you know? So I would just avoid people and situations. And, you know, in high school, there was a side entrance to the school and there was a front entrance. I never went in or out of the front entrance, essentially. And one time I did, I actually got jumped. And so I just found ways, and the same thing, you know, I'd go out with my friends and then there'd be like some fight that would break out because of complete nonsense, because people were drunk and wanted to, you know, they were bored and so they wanted to get into a fight. I would avoid that. And my avoidance of that, in part of me was like, well, if I was more of a man, more tough, then I would actually jump in and I would be the guy who was, you know, jumping on top. And, you know, because that's what was valued, at least in the culture that I was from.
And certain, like, culturing for war in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we're still cultured for war. I think that's at the heart of, at least that was my upbringing. I'm trying to do that differently for my children. Yeah.
I feel like I've heard you talk about just feeling that you were different. You weren't one of those kids that naturally wanted to jump in and fight. So how, if you didn't see yourself as like a tough guy, is there some symbol that you felt you were more like what is an element in the world that you felt more like?
I saw myself as special at the end of the day, and I'm not sure if that came from my parents or I don't know if that was like me connected to my essence, but I felt that my life was too worthwhile to put at risk. So there's some level of, I saw myself, there's a fragility. Like, I don't want I didn't want to, I didn't want to put my life at risk. And if I was going to be most true and vulnerable of who I was at my essence, was a flower. Like you know, just someone that is meant to be protected. That everyone doesn't have to be a warrior in order to be in this world. That ultimately, like, we should, you know, those who are drawn towards the warrior path and to the protection of our collective, awesome. I'm so honoring of that choice, and I don't think everyone should be conditioned in that way.
It's really beautifully said, and Yeah, more like a flower protected. But when I experience you, it's not guarded. So there's an openness, and I'm seeing some incredible comments here. Wendy just saying your vulnerability is so appreciated. And Shonda saying, I'm sure we can all relate in one way or another, and to share this with the Facebook world shows your true strength. Putting yourself out there in a vulnerable state will only make you stronger. Thank you so much for your courage.
Thank you.
And I'm curious for the men who might be tuning in of that piece of that some men cut out for being a warrior, or even some women cut out for being a warrior, that's part of your essence. And can we honor that there's nobility in every constitution, in every way of being, whether you're a flower that sings and dances and expresses and moves energy in that way, or if you're a warrior who moves energy by making contact, with aggression. There can be room for it all.
Yeah, absolutely, and such an honoring of it all, right? Like I grew up with, my closest friends were actually ended up being New York City firefighters and police officers, and they're much larger than me, and but we grew up together, and there's so two people that would potentially not find each other today, but because we grew up together, we have this incredible bond. And man, I so valued their warriorness. I did. I learned from it. I admired it. And the unfortunate part was I saw myself as less than as a result of it. And that's what I would wish to be different for, if I could do it over, I would wish to totally honor who they are and what they bring, and see myself as totally bringing something different. And just this way of seeing one another as just totally unique and special. I know we say the words, but I don't think we live into it. And I don't think we actually create the education systems or the conversations or the conditioning that actually makes it happen. That, oh, I'm totally awesome and unique for what I bring.
That's really awesome. Thank you for that. So you were talking a little bit earlier that maybe power and money is really a conduit towards sex, and ultimately we're just chasing sex, or men are chasing sex. So it's what happens when you get all three of these? So when I get sex, money, and power, then is there some finish line of feeling that we're really after? What do we imagine will happen? Or is it just that we don't even think that far in advance?
I wonder if, I'm not sure when we stop chasing the external, and I don't want to say we transcend the humanness of chasing sex, money, power. But where I've gone next is essentially, money has become more about contribution. Power has become more about building the most compassionate parts of myself so that I can be compassionate for myself and others. Because what I've learned about power is that you can never use it. If you use power over someone, you've degraded trust. If I ever had you do something because I'm in a place of power on my behalf, because I'm in the place of power, that's the end of whatever I hope to create together. And so I buy into it from a survival perspective, but I don't buy into it from a does this feel amazing, and can we create and collaborate and go to the next level? And if I'm playing a power game, it's just not going to work. So.
And then did you say what was beyond money? You said, I think
money.
Sex,
Money beyond money is contribution.
Okay, wait. Sex is.
Sex I didn't cover yet.
Oh, you didn't cover that one.
I didn't cover yet.
So, but one of them you said compassion.
compassion is when we stop focusing on power. We move towards compassion. We move towards self-love. We move towards understanding like what's at the crux of what's up for someone else and work with it, and not just make you do the thing I want you to do because I want you to do it and because I pay you, or because it's just like that kills inspiration, and I think you 10x your productivity, your efficiency when you actually have the people you're collaborating with working from inspiration.
That's great. Okay, so power goes to compassion. Money is what transcends that is contribution. And then sex?
Is vulnerability.
Oh.
Yeah. I think is about building intimacy through what feels like extreme vulnerability.
What is the evolution of your vulnerability then right now? What would you say is that growing edge for you? Because you seem to be quite vulnerable, but is it still an ever expanding process?
Absolutely. Every day. It's minimizing the time period by which I feel something and which I say it, even if it creates pain and even if I don't have a story around it. So I'm feeling disconnected from you. I don't know why, or I'm feeling distrust between us. And I don't have a story to put towards it yet, but I want to name the feeling so that we can have it in the field and we're exploring it. And then we're actually like, that's the beginning of a level of vulnerability that breeds intimacy and breeds the next conversation that actually is the healing. But you can't know, like, I used to want to have my story told. Oh, I'm feeling this because X, Y, and Z. And I know those X, Y, and Z, and I'm clear, and I'm coming into the conversation with X, Y, and Z. But I think as long as I was creating the conditions where I needed to give X, Y, and Z, I was actually holding back from speaking truth.
Well, we're meaning-making machines, so the brain actually is something that we talk about in our coaching program, is being meaning-making machines, so much wanting the world or what happens to us to make sense, and so putting story on it to have it make sense. But sometimes we get that part wrong. All kinds of generalizations and distortions can happen in creating a story around it. So what I hear you pointing to is just naming the feeling that's occurring, trusting the feeling, and being willing to speak it and be in a dance with the other person versus asserting all this meaning for it, because then we're arguing about the story versus actually, wait, but there's a feeling of disconnection between us. Is that more?
It's absolutely right. And it's so key. It's all a co-creation. And so for me to enter into with a story is actually a distrusting of the co-creation that's about to happen, where I name a feeling, I don't know what that's about, and oftentimes it's because something I had no idea, and I could never have told that story because I'm not in the other person's shoes. So the distrust I'm feeling is actually because they're holding something back that hasn't been shared or they were scared to share. And so I'm feeling distrust and I'm just naming it, and that actually is the conduit that allows for them to share their vulnerability.
So, but that feels like it requires being in touch with your feelings and you're trusting your intuition. And is that a foreign concept for men? What would you say to men who might want to start accessing more of that vulnerability and that just approaching that feeling without making a bunch of meaning, but actually trusting that there's a feeling there and noticing where there's connection or disconnection as an opportunity to increase intimacy, for example? Because I think one of the things that I know we've talked about before is just the illusion that somehow money, sex, and power will get us what we really want, which is ultimately intimacy, which is connection, which is belonging, safety. Like we want love, safety, and belonging, and a sense of intimacy, and we chase these things thinking that we'll get there, or a connection to spirit, right? Well, that we'll get there, and but ultimately it's vulnerability, the courageous vulnerability that will create that connection. So what would you say to men who have been conditioned to be warriors, who want to tap more into this expressing feelings?
Yeah. I guess the first place I go is some form of men's group. I think is like create like a small men's group amongst people who would like to actually develop this muscle and do it amongst men. Develop that, share in a way that that creates vulnerability for the rest of the people around you. And so when I think about what I've done quite a bit of over the last 15 years is being part of some form of men's group. And I've time periods of not doing it and doing it, but I think the muscle that it helped build was this, I get more out of life when I'm vulnerable. Like I feel more connected to myself and I feel more connected to others when I'm revealing of myself. And what's so awesome is that you actually then get this like truth bomb from people who so rarely bring truth bombs. And it becomes like this, like, oh my goodness, like this incredibly special container, because this is the only place I've actually felt safe enough to say this. And so, and I think that's, I think starting with women is harder to actually bring that level of vulnerability because of the fear of judgment, the fear of being seen as weak, or
so it feels more dangerous,
or not enough of a rock, right? So you want to kind of, there's we're balancing these, like, what it means to be masculine, both conditioned and not, and with this expressing our feelings, and they don't necessarily like mesh well at times, and so in that, I think men supporting other men is a great place to start.
Yeah, I know some friends of ours have been in a men's group, and that I think you've been a part of as well. And although mostly what has happened in the men's group has stayed completely secret, I heard that there was an opening question, and I don't know if this is true or not, but that the opening question in the men's group was I think it was like, what do you have to clear,
Withholds,
right?
Yeah.
Withholds, like what are you withholding in the group? But also, what is the most vulnerable thing you're willing to share?
Right. Like that, like it was just it's an orientation of, you do a heart share and essentially what's so, but leaning into the most vulnerable thing you feel comfortable sharing, or you don't feel comfortable sharing, but you do it anyway. And I think that's a great, that's a high leverage move, right? Just set the container such that this is what we're stepping into. We're going to share what's most true and most vulnerable right now.
And I imagine when one man does it, that it sparks a domino. It's just permission to make a
it's almost embarrassing if I don't share something. It's like, oh man, I got to really dig deep on this one tonight. Shit, you just shared that.
That's incredible. And I'm seeing some, Tim, thank you for your comment. I love hearing from the men if you're resonating with something that Eric's sharing, or there's something vulnerable that you want to share about your experience with sex, money, and power. Please do post your comment. And seeing you, Tim, saying intelligence is a skill not every warrior possesses. The intelligence to know when to and when not to is the mark of a true warrior. That's great. And Mike, hey Mike, naming feelings as they occur from a place of acceptance is a safe place to start. So really beautiful there. I'm gonna give you like a sentence starter if you'd be willing to play with this. As a man, my purpose is to magnify blank.
Aliveness.
Mm.
Yeah. I am absolutely, and empowerment. Aliveness and empowerment. I am definitely, you put me in a conversation, you put me in front of an audience, like if people are not walking out more alive and more empowered, then I'm not being me. That is like at the core, I've been that way since I was freaking 12. Just like that is who I stood for other people. Like I have some way of seeing people's talents and believing in them.
Mm.
And I get to piggyback off of those talents. Like I get to like, oh my goodness, you do that?
That's great. Is there any closing thoughts on sex, money, and power that you feel called to share before I ask you about throne reading?
Just this building compassion for all of our parts, whether men and women, masculine and feminine parts of ourselves. We have to have compassion, first awareness, and then compassion for all of them. And so any place where there's inner bullying going on, where like, ooh, I have shame or guilt around that part, no way. Mm-hmm. Like that's how we actually disconnect from our feelings. In order to feel our feelings, we need to actually love them. Otherwise, we push them away, we hide from them. So step one is loving all parts.
Loving all parts. And I'm seeing a great comment from Dom saying vulnerability isn't just speaking from the heart, but sometimes it's also shutting up long enough to allow our hearts and our inner spirits speak to us so we can actually share. Beautifully articulated. That's great. So I'd love to hear more ahas that you've had from this conversation. And this wouldn't be real talk if we didn't close with throne reading. Now, every week, as I mentioned before the show, that I like to share my throne reading because that is just very precious time that I know I get to read, to actually absorb and digest them. Because having kids, and you have kids, yes?
Yep.
How many you got?
Two.
You've got two. Do they ever come to the bathroom with you?
Yep.
Makes it hard to get the reading done. So anyway, I asked Eric before this if there was a book that inspired him on in this topic of who do you want to be as a man? What does it mean to be a man? And would you share this book? You could hold it up so they can see.
This is David Deda's The Way of the Superior Man. And I think it's great for women and men. David Deda also he's done great audio talks, I'm sure, that you could find online as well. But a really talented teacher that helped me place my attention where it was most serving for me to place my attention. So I think he does a really good job at of what is the high leverage moves for developing as a man. And for women reading this book, I think it's also it just helps build compassion for exactly what's so.
Yeah, the two roles, the dance that
of feminine and masculine, and that they both live within us, and where are we placing our attention, and is it serving?
Now, I know that you have a dream to work with men at some point. Is there anything you could tune? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but is there anything you could tune into? Like, what is important to you about doing men's work? What do you have hope for the future of manhood, the culture of manhood?
I want to work with anger. I want to create a culture that can hold men's anger in a healthy container. I think this is really, really important. And I don't think it's, I think men have to learn how to bring their anger to other men in a healthy way so that we can hold it, literally, physically hold it, and know we're held, and that there's no part of us that is going to overpower us.
Does that mean that you're a warrior after all?
Absolutely.
Not just a flower?
Yeah. not just a flower.
That was a surprising answer. I don't think we were expecting to hear that after all this talk of being sensitive and vulnerable and not being a warrior, meant for warrior, being more of a flowers, and then you like want to work with anger. It like came as a surprise.
Yeah, well, it's range. I mean, you gotta hold all of it so that you can love all of it, so that you can bring all of it, and then with that, and have complete safety in all that is.
Well, I want to thank you for showing up today, and this provocative topic is pretty bold. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great. Thanks, Stacey. Thanks for the love, everyone.
Thanks for the love, and if there's something that inspired you here today, please do like it. Feel free to share this with the men and women in your life who might be inspired by this topic, and we'll see you next week on Real Talk. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.